The world as it was known ended on a brisk October morning. It began subtly, with whispers of a strange illness spreading in remote towns. Reports trickled in about fevered patients, their eyes clouding over with a milky haze before they turned violent. What started as local incidents soon engulfed entire regions. By the time governments acknowledged the crisis, it was too late. The infection, known only as the necrovirus, spread faster than any pathogen in history. It wasn't airborne, nor did it need to be. A single bite or scratch was enough. The infected weren't merely mindless, they were driven, relentless, and terrifyingly intelligent in their pursuit of the living. By the end of the year, 90% of humanity was either dead or one of them. Sarah Lennox tightened the straps on her tattered backpack, her eyes scanning the desolate streets of what had once been Manhattan. The towering skyscrapers, symbols of human achievement, now stood as hollow monuments to a lost civilization. Vines and moss crept up their sides, and the air was filled with an unnatural silence. Beside her, Jason, a wiry teenager with a scar running down his cheek, fiddled nervously with a rusty crowbar. "Do you think they're still here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're always here," Sarah replied grimly. She motioned for him to follow as they crept down the cracked pavement, careful to avoid stepping on debris that might make noise. Their destination was a grocery store, long abandoned but rumored to still have supplies in its basement. Food was scarce, and the survivors left in the world had become as dangerous as the infected. As they approached the store, a distant moan echoed through the streets. Jason froze, his knuckles whitening around the crowbar. "Stay calm," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the knot of fear tightening in her chest. "Move quietly." The moaning grew louder, joined by the shuffling of feet. From the shadows of a nearby alley, they emerged. The zombies. Their skin hung in tattered shreds, exposing muscle and bone. Eyes that once held life were now dull and vacant, save for the hunger that drove them. "Run!" Sarah shouted, grabbing Jason's arm. The two sprinted toward the store, their breaths ragged as the undead horde gave chase. They burst through the rusted doors and slammed them shut, barricading them with whatever they could find. The pounding began almost immediately, the creatures throwing themselves against the barrier. "We can't stay here." Jason gasped, panic in his voice. "I know." Sarah snapped, her mind racing. "We'll head to the roof. Maybe we can lose them." They climbed a narrow staircase, the groans of the infected reverberating through the building. As they reached the rooftop, Sarah scanned the skyline. A helicopter, black and sleek, was hovering in the distance. "Do you see that?" Jason asked, his eyes wide with hope. "It's probably military," Sarah said. "Or someone worse." "What could be worse than this?" Sarah didn't answer. Across the city, in a fortified bunker beneath what used to be Central Park, a group of scientists worked tirelessly. Dr. Elias Grayson, a gaunt man with sunken eyes, stared at a computer screen displaying rows of data. "This is it," he muttered to himself. "The key to stopping this nightmare." The bunker housed one of the last remaining labs dedicated to finding a cure for the necrovirus. The breakthrough had come just days ago, a serum that could potentially reverse the infection. The problem was distribution. "We don't have the resources to mass-produce this," said Dr. Camille Reyes, his colleague. "Even if we did, how do we get it out there?" Elias pinched the bridge of his nose. "One step at a time. First, we need a test subject." Camille's eyes darkened. "You mean someone bitten?" Elias nodded. It's the only way to know if it works. On the rooftop, Sarah and Jason's respite was short-lived. The barricade below gave way, and the undead began flooding into the building. "We're trapped," Jason said, his voice trembling. "Not yet," Sarah replied. She spotted a fire escape leading to the adjacent building. "Come on." They climbed across, narrowly avoiding the grasping hands of the infected. The other building was equally decrepit, but it offered a momentary refuge. As they caught their breath, Sarah noticed a figure moving in the shadows. She raised her makeshift weapon, a lead pipe, and called out, "Who's there?" A man stepped into the dim light, his face gaunt but alert. He held a rifle, aimed directly at them. "Drop the pipe," he said. Sarah hesitated. "We're not infected." "That's what they all say," the man replied, his finger tightening on the trigger. Jason stepped forward, his hands raised. "Please, we just want to survive." The man lowered the rifle slightly, his eyes narrowing. "You're heading the wrong way if you want to live. The city's crawling with them." "Do you know a safe place?" Sarah asked. The man smirked grimly. "Safe? No such thing anymore. But there's a lab under Central Park. Rumor is they're working on a cure." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "A cure? Could it really be possible? We need to get there," she said. The man shrugged. "Good luck. You'll never make it on foot." The journey to Central Park was a harrowing gauntlet. The streets were overrun, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. Twice, they narrowly avoided death, once from the infected and once from a group of raiders scavenging for supplies. When they finally reached the park, it was eerily quiet. The once beautiful greenery was now overgrown and wild, and the silence was oppressive. "There," Jason whispered, pointing to a hatch partially hidden by foliage. Sarah nodded and approached cautiously. She knocked, and after a tense moment, the hatch opened. Elias stared at them in disbelief. "Who are you?" "Survivors," Sarah said. "We heard you're working on a cure." Elias hesitated, then stepped aside to let them in. Inside the bunker, Sarah and Jason were briefed on the serum. "We need someone to test it on," Elias said. "If it works, it could save what's left of humanity." Sarah looked at Jason, then back at Elias. "If it doesn't?" Elias didn't answer. As if on cue, a loud bang echoed through the bunker. The infected had found their way in. "Seal the lab!" Camille shouted, but it was too late. The creatures swarmed the facility, and chaos erupted. Elias grabbed the vial of serum and thrust it into Sarah's hands. "Go!" he shouted. "Take it and run." "What about you?" "I'll hold them off." "Just go." Sarah hesitated, then pulled Jason with her as they fled through a back exit. The streets were a war zone. The infected were everywhere, and the survivors had begun fighting among themselves for resources. Sarah clutched the vial tightly, knowing it might be the only hope left. She and Jason made their way to an old broadcast tower, their plan to signal any remaining military forces. When they reached the tower, they barricaded themselves inside. Sarah found a functioning transmitter and began broadcasting. "This is Sarah Lennox. I have the cure. If anyone can hear this, we need extraction." There was no response. Hours passed, and the infected began to gather outside the tower. "They're coming," Jason said, his voice shaking. Sarah held the vial up to the light, its contents glowing faintly. "This is it," she said softly. Everything we've fought for. The barricades began to buckle under the weight of the horde. Jason looked at her, his eyes filled with fear. What do we do? Sarah took a deep breath. We fight. As the infected broke through, Sarah and Jason stood side by side, ready to face the end. But as the first creature lunged at them, the roar of helicopter blades filled the air. A military chopper descended, its guns blazing as it mowed down the horde. Soldiers rappelled down, grabbing Sarah and Jason and pulling them to safety. As they ascended, Sarah held up the vial. This is it, she said. This can save us. The soldier nodded grimly. Let us hope so. As the chopper flew into the horizon, Sarah looked down at the ruined city below. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope. Humanity had one last chance to reclaim the Earth. The last stand, redemption of Earth. The world was no longer a place of hope. Cities lay in ruins, their skylines silhouetted against a blood-red horizon. Zombies roamed the earth, their guttural moans a constant reminder of humanity's downfall. Survivors clung to life in fortified enclaves, their numbers dwindling with each passing day. But deep within the ruins of a once thriving metropolis, a glimmer of hope had emerged. Dr. Sarah Lawson, a virologist who had dedicated her life to finding a cure, held the key to humanity's salvation, a serum derived from a rare genetic anomaly in certain humans. Beside her was Jason, a soldier who had witnessed the horrors of the outbreak firsthand. Together, they embarked on a desperate journey to the last functional lab on Earth, a hidden facility in the Rocky Mountains. The journey was fraught with danger. Every shadow held a potential threat, every sound could herald a horde. The zombies were not mindless, they had evolved. They hunted in packs, their senses sharper, their movements faster. Yet, there was something even more terrifying on the horizon, a new breed of infected, larger, stronger, and almost intelligent. As they made their way through the crumbling remains of a city, they encountered a survivor. Marcus, a scavenger with a knack for finding hidden resources, joined their mission after proving his worth by leading them through a gauntlet of undead. The trio moved cautiously, their breaths shallow, their weapons always ready. They reached a military outpost to gather supplies for the journey ahead. The base was eerily silent, its gates hanging open. Inside, the walls were smeared with blood, and the ground was littered with torn uniforms. The group advanced cautiously, their nerves frayed. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air, and a horde burst forth from the shadows. The zombies were faster than any they had encountered before, their movements coordinated, almost strategic. Jason fired his rifle, his shots precise, but the sheer number of attackers was overwhelming. Marcus wielded a machete with brutal efficiency, while Sarah clung to the serum, her mind racing with thoughts of its importance. They fought their way to a barracks, barricading the doors as the undead pounded relentlessly. "They're getting smarter," Marcus panted, his hands trembling. "We can't hold them off forever," Jason said, reloading his weapon. Sarah looked at the serum, her determination stealing her. "We have to keep moving. The lab isn't far. This is our only chance." As the zombies breached the barricade, the group made a daring escape through an underground tunnel. The path led them to an abandoned subway system, its tunnels dark and foreboding. Here, they encountered the new breed, the Titans. These monstrous zombies stood over 7 feet tall, their muscles grotesquely swollen, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Jason and Marcus fought valiantly, but the Titans were nearly unstoppable. Bullets slowed them, but only a direct shot to the head brought them down. the group narrowly escaped, emerging from the tunnels battered but alive. When they finally reached the lab, they found it still operational but barely staffed. A small group of scientists had barricaded themselves inside, working tirelessly to keep the facility running. They welcomed Sarah and her serum, immediately beginning tests on captured infected. The first trial was a mix of hope and horror. The serum worked, reversing the infection in a test subject. The zombie-esque grotesque features faded, replaced by a terrified human face. But the process was excruciating, and not all subjects survived. Time was running out, and the undead outside the lab were growing restless. The Titans began to surround the lab, their low growls echoing through the mountain air. The survivors knew an assault was imminent. Jason and Marcus rallied the defenders, preparing for a final stand. As the scientists worked feverishly to refine the serum, the survivors fortified the lab with makeshift defenses. The night of the attack was unlike anything they had faced before. The Titans led the charge, smashing through barricades with terrifying ease. The survivors fought with everything they had, their screams mixing with the roars of the undead. Sarah and the scientists continued their work, the fate of humanity resting in their hands. In the chaos, Marcus was bitten, his flesh torn by a Titan's jaws. He refused to let the infection consume him, grabbing a grenade and hurling himself into a group of Titans, sacrificing himself to buy the others time. Jason fought like a man possessed, protecting Sarah as the lab's defenses crumbled. The serum was finally ready. Sarah loaded it into a prototype dispersal system, a device capable of releasing the cure as an airborne agent. But reaching the dispersal point was nearly impossible, the lab overrun with zombies. Jason and Sarah fought their way to the roof, where the device could be activated. Jason was wounded, his movements slowing as the infection began to take hold. "Go," he urged Sarah, handing her the last of his ammunition. "I can't do this without you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You can," he said, his voice resolute. "You have to." Sarah activated the device as Jason made his last stand, holding off the undead with sheer determination. The dispersal system roared to life, releasing the serum into the air. The zombies began to convulse, their monstrous forms reverting to human as the cure spread. As the dawn broke, the undead threat was no more. The Titans fell, their grotesque bodies collapsing into heaps of decaying flesh. Survivors emerged from hiding, their hope rekindled. Sarah stood on the rooftop, the vial of serum in her hand, a symbol of humanity's resilience. Jason's sacrifice and Marcus's bravery would not be forgotten. The fight for survival had ended, but the fight to rebuild had just begun. Earth had been scarred, but it was not broken. Humanity had reclaimed its future, one born of sacrifice, courage, and the unyielding will to survive.